Welcome to the Dream Novel channel. Before starting to listen to the fun in this clip, don't forget to like and comment, so that the admin will have the encouragement to continue making clips. Let's go listen. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 196, Kanna Torment. I told you, it's much better to go fishing at the Black Lake. Why don't you just leave the Niffler alone? Kanna said, watching Kyle as he dangled a stick with a red stone in front of the eager creature. In the common room, Kyle grinned, unfazed. It's not just any stone, it's a philosopher's stone, he corrected her. Yeah, right, a magic rock. Kanna rolled her eyes. I saw you drop it last night. It's just an ordinary pebble. Is this how you usually trick the Niffler? Don't put it that way, Kyle replied, smirking. It's just a bit of fun. Look how happy he is. Kanna raised an eyebrow, glancing at the Niffler. The little creature was practically panting with excitement, hopping around on its stubby legs. She sighed, unable to see any happiness in his frantic excitement. Shaking her head, Kanna pulled out a golden galleon, waving it to try and catch Niffler's attention. But to her surprise, the Niffler, who normally couldn't resist the sight of a galleon, ignored her, his eyes glued to the red stone in Kyle's hand. Unwilling to give up, she tried a second galleon, but it was no use. Save your breath. My stone is way shinier than a galleon, Kyle boasted, grabbing Niffler by the scruff and gently tossing him back into his box. Besides, you've already given him 15 galleons over the past few days. I should remind you, a Niffler really can't be used as a wallet. That's none of your business. Kanna retorted, her cheeks turning pink. And, for the record, I gave those galleons to the Niffler, you can't just take them. Ahem. I'm not that kind of person. Kyle's face twitched before he added, but, on another note, shouldn't you be with Professor Snape right now for tutoring? What are you still doing here in the common room? I passed Professor Snape's test yesterday and successfully brewed the draft of Living Death, so tutoring's over. So, you're free now? Kyle asked, pulling out a chessboard and setting it on the table. How about a game of wizard chess? Alright, Kanna agreed. She didn't have many friends at Hogwarts, and with both Cho and her roommate away, she was feeling bored. Chess would be a nice way to pass the time. But let's be clear, I'm not very good at chess, so you can't blame me if I mess up. Wait, is this wizard chess? Kanna, who was about to set up the pieces, froze as she looked down. Instead of the familiar chess pieces, she saw tiny figures of different magical creatures. At the front row were Nifflers, while the back row featured a troll, a hippogriff, a swooping evil, a three-headed dog, and even a dragon. It's a little custom version, Kyle explained. I had nothing to do after finishing my homework, so I gave them a makeover. Just changed their appearances, really. Wasn't too hard. Kanna looked up at him with an incredulous expression. Nothing to do after finishing your homework. Did he even realize what he'd just said? She had been catching up on 10 whole days of classes, with homework on top. Did Kyle have any idea how heartless that sounded? What are you staring at? You're the black pieces, so you go first, Kyle urged. Kanna glared at him before looking back at the chessboard. By now, the magical creatures had taken their positions on the board, and Kanna quickly guessed what each one represented. The two of them played 3 long games of chess in the common room, after which Kyle was desperate to escape. Kanna's earlier claim about her chess skills being average was a massive understatement. Her skill level was, in truth, painfully average. And while playing against an inexperienced opponent could be fun every now and then, Kanna's style came with a unique torture. She took an eternity to make each move. What could have been a 5-minute game dragged on for over half an hour. By the end, Kyle was beyond frustrated, trapped in a game that had long since lost its appeal. He would have gladly rewritten his homework, twice, if it meant escaping another game with Kanna. But Kanna wasn't having it, and she insisted he stay until noon. Finally, as soon as lunch was over, Kyle made a break for it. He left the castle and headed straight for Hagrid's hut, determined to spend the rest of the afternoon somewhere chess-free. At Hagrid's, he ran into Harry and Ron. Ron explained that Harry had been plagued by nightmares lately, and they'd come to see if Hagrid might be able to help. "So, why didn't you just go to Madame Pomfrey in the hospital wing?" Kyle asked, baffled. He couldn't fathom Harry and Ron's logic. As far as he could see, the only way Hagrid could solve Harry's nightmares was by knocking him out with a well-placed punch. Or was it just that all first years were unusually reckless? I don't want to go to the hospital wing," Harry mumbled, averting his eyes. Of course, he knew Madame Pomfrey was more qualified than Hagrid. But if he went to the hospital wing, he worried she might press him to reveal the details of his dreams, something he wasn't ready to share with anyone else. "Sorry, Harry, I can't help you," Hagrid said, filling their mugs with tea and passing around his infamous rock cakes. "Kyle's right, you should go straight to the hospital wing. I went there myself once when I couldn't sleep, and Madame Pomfrey sorted me out in a minute. The potion she gave me wasn't the nicest smelling, but it worked like a charm." "All right," Harry replied, a bit crestfallen. Even though Hagrid had recommended it, he still had no intention of going to the hospital wing. Maybe once the term started and things got busier, his nightmares would naturally fade. He sighed and took a small bite of a rock cake. "If you really don't want to go to the hospital wing, I have an alternative you might want to try," Kyle said, pulling out a small bottle of potion and placing it on the table. "What's that?" Ron asked curiously. "Draught of Living Death, the same potion Hagrid used," Kyle replied. "Just a tiny sip sends you into a deep, dreamless sleep. You won't wake up even if a dragon's dancing right next to you." Harry picked up the bottle, eyeing it with uncertainty. "Will this stop the nightmares?" "It should," Kyle nodded. "Or at least you could try it and see. Just take a tiny sip, enough to let you sleep for about an hour. It won't mess up your rest tonight. But one thing, it's really strong, so you'd better wait until you're back in the dormitory." But before Kyle could finish, Harry tipped the bottle and took a small sip. "What did you say?" Harry asked, putting the bottle back down. "Nothing, never mind." Kyle sighed, looking at Ron. "You'd better be ready to help. I don't think Potter's going to make it back to the dormitory on his own." And sure enough, just as Kyle spoke, Harry's head drooped, and he slumped forward in his chair, completely motionless. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 197, The Promise of the Weasley Brothers. Cedric and Cho returned only as evening fell. Fred and George had gone to Hogsmeade to buy several large bottles of butterbeer to celebrate their return to school. Each person in the group of 6, or rather, the team, received a bottle, with only Kyle left out. "You guys are holding a grudge a little too long," Kyle said, eyeing the butterbeer in everyone else's hands, his lips pursed. "It was just a joke, and you're still mad about it?" "Oh, if it isn't Kyle, the new Order of Merlin recipient," Fred said in an exaggeratedly surprised tone. "You should have told us sooner. I assumed someone of your noble rank wouldn't lower themselves to drink butterbeer." "Wait a minute, I don't think he's actually a Order of Merlin recipient," George added. "In the trophy room, he only has a trophy for the special award for services to the school. And it's from last year. Practically ancient history." "I said that's enough." Kyle sighed, rubbing his forehead. "It's just one Order of Merlin. Believe me or not, I'll be knocking some sense into your heads with it every day." After a brief, strange silence. "Ha!" George let out a strange snort, then burst into laughter, clutching his stomach. "I can't take it, ha ha ha." "Fred, did you hear that?" "Loud and clear, George," Fred replied, wiping away tears of laughter. "Quick, let's get the last bottle of butterbeer out. He's starting to lose it." "I thought the same thing. Knocking us with Orders of Merlin, now, that's the best joke I've heard all year. I'll be laughing about that for ages." Kyle raised an eyebrow as they finally handed him a bottle. He took a calm sip and asked, "What if I actually could?" Then we'll be taking your butterbeer every single time. Fred replied nonchalantly. If someone could really get an Order of Merlin in the second year, I'd fly around the school tap dancing while balancing 3 trophies, George chimed in. Count me in. The two of them could hardly keep from laughing at their own jokes. Kyle merely raised an eyebrow and took another sip of his butterbeer without a word. It was indeed delicious, a bit like hot cocoa, rich with the taste of butter, but not too heavy. No wonder it was so popular. Perhaps they could make this a daily ritual, though he wasn't sure if the Weasley twins' wallets could keep up. Not long after the students returned to Hogwarts, dinner began. Hermione frowned as she watched Ron piling food onto a large plate. What are you doing? And where's Harry? Isn't he going to eat? That's what I'm saying, replied Ron, holding a chicken leg in his hand. Harry's asleep in his dorm. I called and called, but he's out cold. If we don't bring him some food now, he'll wake up starving. Asleep, now? Hermione looked even more puzzled. She knew Harry was prone to dozing off, often falling asleep in the library, but why would he be sleeping at a time like this? Wait, you're not planning on sneaking out tonight, are you? Hermione asked suspiciously. Of course not, we stopped doing that ages ago. Ron's face reddened. It was Kyle. He gave Harry some draft of living death, saying it would help with his nightmares. Then Ron explained what had happened earlier that afternoon in Hagrid's hut. Except Harry drank a bit too much and has been asleep for 4 hours. How much did he drink? Ron thought for a moment. I don't know, maybe a small glass. It wasn't much, really. A glass? Hermione's frown deepened. I've read in books that just a small spoonful of draft of living death can put someone to sleep for 2 hours, and he drank a whole glass. Yeah, I know, Kyle said the same thing, Ron sighed. So, what do we do now? There's not much we can do, Hermione replied. We'll just have to wait until he wakes up on his own, but that might not be until late tonight or even early morning. She eyed the massive plate in Ron's hands. Are you sure you need to bring that much? Of course. What if he's really hungry when he wakes up? Ron said casually. It takes a bit longer, but if you toast them in the fireplace, they'll taste as good as fresh. That's what we always did on holiday. Hermione gave him a hard look, a dangerous glint in her eyes. So you spent the whole holiday figuring out how to toast food instead of looking for Nicholas Flamel, is that it? We did look. Ron protested quickly. We even snuck into the restricted section. Just so you know, the books there scream when you open them. We almost got caught by Filch. Hermione raised a skeptical eyebrow. This was the first she'd heard of books that screamed, and she couldn't help doubting Ron's story. But Ron patted his chest in assurance, insisting it was true. After all, Harry had told him so himself, and Ron seemed absolutely certain. After the opening dinner, everyone returned to their dormitories. Hermione was right, it was late at night before Harry finally stirred and opened his eyes. He tried to speak but felt his throat was dry. Thankfully, there was a half-full glass of pumpkin juice beside him. Not knowing whose it was, Harry took a big gulp without a second thought. This is the dormitory. He set down the glass and took in his surroundings. Beside the pumpkin juice, there was a plate full of hearty food. A wave of hunger hit him, and Harry's stomach rumbled painfully, a feeling he hadn't experienced since leaving the Dursleys' house. He grabbed a baked potato, eating its skin and all in just a few bites, which made him feel considerably better. He noticed Neville and Seamus asleep, while Ron was sitting at the table, chin propped on his hands, nodding off. Harry walked over and gave him a nudge. Ron, what are you doing sleeping here? Ron blinked groggily, then, seeing Harry, exclaimed, "Hm. Harry. Oh, thank goodness you're awake. How long was I asleep?" Harry asked. I don't know. Ron rubbed his eyes. But it must have been more than 8 hours. How do you feel? Fantastic. Harry said with enthusiasm. "That's the most restful sleep I've ever had, and I didn't dream a single thing." "That's great." Ron yawned, stumbling over to his own bed. He looked like he wanted to say more, but he was so exhausted that he fell asleep before he could utter another word. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 198, An Unexpected Gain. Once the semester began, the professor's patrols of the library and nightly rounds relaxed quite a bit. After all, they were now busy grading assignments and had little time to monitor students at night. That night, Kyle, who had been laying low for 2 weeks, eagerly crept to the library with the Marauder's map in hand. The shelves in his magically expanded box had been installed, but they couldn't stay empty forever. Kyle planned to fill them by the semester's end. It was a daunting task, but if he cut back an hour of sleep each day and worked a bit harder, he was confident he could manage it. Wand in hand, Kyle made his way skillfully to the restricted section. This time, instead of methodically taking books off the shelves as before, he examined each title carefully, only selecting those he actually needed. After half an hour, Kyle had collected 3 books, all dealing with the subject of basilisks, deadly sight medieval explorations, ancient species that are gradually disappearing, how to make a rooster lay eggs. One, however, seemed oddly out of place. Kyle inspected the last book, which had a black cover and was about as thick as a notebook. He couldn't quite understand how it ended up in the restricted section. Still, he thought Newt and Hagrid might enjoy it, so he decided to copy it for them as a Christmas present next year. Since it had been a while since he last ventured out at night, and because he'd found so many books this time, Kyle stayed in the library until dawn. In the following days, he returned to his usual busy schedule. Quidditch practice was in full swing again. Luckily, Harris's coaching was more relaxed than other captains, so even as the competition approached, they were only practicing 3 times a week. Gryffindor, however, was a different story. Wood was almost fanatical about winning the next game and had the team training nearly every afternoon. Even during the string of rainy days following heavy snowfall, Kyle could see them out on the Quidditch pitch. Fred and George had complained multiple times that Wood was turning into a training tyrant and didn't seem to care about their well-being. "If this keeps up, we'll be living in the hospital wing before the match even begins," Fred joked. Kyle, however, suspected they might be exaggerating a bit, especially since Hufflepuff's next opponent was Gryffindor. Besides Quidditch training, Kyle found time each weekend to visit Hagrid's hut. Ever since Hagrid had started looking after the magical creatures in the Forbidden Forest, his hut was full of surprises. "Here you go, Kyle, unicorn tail hair," Hagrid said one day, pouring Kyle a cup of tea and handing him a small bag. "I remember you're fond of this stuff, so I saved some for you, all naturally shed." Kyle opened the bag and peered inside. It was filled with a dozen or so long, silvery hairs in perfect condition. "This many?" Kyle asked in surprise. "Did you collect all these recently?" Unicorns don't shed nearly as much as Krupps, especially not their tails. Without a wizard's intervention, a single hair might take 6 months to fall. The fact that Hagrid had collected so many in just a few weeks was remarkable. Was there another herd of unicorns in the Forbidden Forest? "Nah, most of them are from a while back," Hagrid replied, placing a copper pot on the stove. "I'd planned to weave them into a cushion, but the tail hair's color is too bright. It just looked odd mixed with the rest, so I picked them out. There were actually more, but I didn't find them. The rest are all here, so you can have 'em." Thanks," Kyle said, smiling awkwardly. Only Hagrid, Kyle thought with a chuckle, would attempt to make a cushion out of unicorn tail hair and then complain it was too bright. He was definitely living up to his reputation. "Oh, Kyle," Hagrid said, his face suddenly reddening. "How's that spider tonic you were brewing for me coming along? Not that I'm rushing you, I'm just curious, yeah, just curious." "It's almost ready," Kyle replied after a moment's thought. "I tested it on Lee Jordan's tarantula, and it worked pretty well. All that's left is to add a 8-leaf flower, but that plant's rare. It'll take about 2 weeks to get here from Diagon Alley." The 8-leaf flower is a delicate ingredient that only works effectively when it's fresh. It's very particular about its environment, just the wrong light or temperature can cause it to wither. For this reason, potion shops don't typically stock it and only harvest it on demand. And it doesn't come cheap. At 29 galleons per plant, with payment required in advance and no refunds, it's quite an investment. Still, Kyle hadn't hesitated to place the order. Considering the unicorn tail hairs Hagrid had given him, now numbering over 10, along with nearly 2 pints of acromantula venom from before, the cost seemed minimal. 8-leaf flower. Hagrid mused, thinking aloud. Is that the plant with 8 leaves, purple in the middle, and either yellow or red on the edges? That's right. When it ripens, the petals turn from red to yellow, Kyle said. Is there a chance you've seen it in the Forbidden Forest? Actually, yes. Hagrid nodded. I saw some just yesterday while I was out on patrol, near where the unicorns live. Could you take me there? Kyle asked eagerly. I promise I won't wander off. No. Hagrid refused without hesitation. The unicorns lived deep within the Forbidden Forest, and it was too dangerous for him to let Kyle go anywhere near there. If you like, I can gather some for you in a few days, Hagrid offered. Of course, I'd love that. Kyle nodded enthusiastically. When you do go, could you dig them up with as much soil as possible? The more soil, the better. And, if you could, let me know ahead of time, I'll wait for you here at the cabin. Hagrid nodded, taking Kyle's instructions to heart. Dig them up with plenty of soil, got it. Oh, by the way, do you still need any more venom from the 8-eyed giant spider? The batch you gave me last time is more than enough, Kyle said, shaking his head. While Hagrid might not mind sharing, Kyle felt guilty about taking too much. Besides, acromantula venom wasn't something he'd need often, what he already had would last him well past graduation. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 199, Who is Snape's most hated person after 2 days of rain? The castle was buzzing with excitement as everyone anticipated the second Quidditch match. Our next opponent is Gryffindor, Harris told the Hufflepuff team earnestly during a practice session. They're nothing like Ravenclaw, they're a very strong team with virtually no weaknesses. Their new seeker, Harry Potter, is every bit as skilled as Cedric, and he has a knack for spotting the golden snitch quickly. Dean, Ronnie. He addressed the team's beaters, don't worry about Angelina, just keep an eye on Potter. What about you and Kyle? One of the beaters asked with a frown. The Weasley twins are sharp players. They'll definitely try to use the bludgers to throw you off. That's fine, Harris replied calmly. We have 2 chasers, so even if we're dodging bludgers, we won't lose any points. But then we won't be able to score quickly, another player pointed out. To be honest, it's unlikely we'll score quickly anyway, Harris admitted after a moment's thought. Wood isn't like other keepers. He's got professional potential and is incredibly strong. Our tactics against Ravenclaw won't fool him. Harris paused, looking around at his team. I'm sure the key to victory will come down to the golden snitch. He turned back to his beaters. So, do whatever it takes to support Cedric. If Potter spots the snitch first, you'll need to find a way to stop him. If necessary, use a bludger to divert the snitch. Don't worry, Captain, Cedric assured him. I'll catch the snitch first. I have complete confidence in you, Harris said with a smile, patting Cedric on the shoulder. That's why I've asked everyone to play around you. Just then, a stir came from the passageway. Several heads turned to see Wood approaching with the Gryffindor team. Oliver, it's our training time. What are you doing here? Harris asked, his tone sharp. Although he and Wood had been on good terms in the past, there was no love lost between them now. Not anymore, Wood replied, striding up to him. I timed it to be here right as your session ended. Wait. Harris glanced up at the darkening sky, realizing what Wood meant. You're not seriously planning to train this late, are you? Don't worry about it, Wood replied curtly. Harris frowned, disapproving of Wood's relentless training schedule. But since none of Gryffindor's players had openly objected, he held his tongue. "Just be careful not to push them too hard, Wood," he murmured in a quiet warning, then turned and led the Hufflepuff team off the Quidditch pitch. As they walked away, Fred and George exchanged helpless looks, shrugging at Kyle in silent commiseration as he left. Once Hufflepuff was gone, Wood jumped right into action. "We've got an hour left, let's make the most of it." "Oh." The team responded with unenthusiastic groans. Even Harry couldn't summon much enthusiasm. With Wood's relentless schedule lately, it felt like he was either in class or on his broom, with barely any time for meals. He just wanted to crawl into his warm bed and get some real rest. But at Wood's urging, the team reluctantly took to the air. Fred and George, however, had other ideas. Ignoring Wood's commands, they began diving at each other, pretending to slip off their broomsticks. "Will you stop messing around?" Wood snapped angrily. "If you keep this up, you'll lose us the match. Snape's the referee this time, and you know he'll find a way to deduct points from Gryffindor." George practically fell off his broom when he heard that. "Snape as referee," he sputtered, spitting out a mouthful of mud. "I thought he didn't care about Quidditch, he barely even shows up to watch." The other players landed beside George, voicing their own concerns. Harry, in particular, looked pale, his whole body trembling. He remembered Ron and Hermione's warning that Snape had cast a spell on his broom during the last match. If he did it again, there'd be no way to stop him. Hermione wouldn't be able to rush onto the pitch. "Harry, you look awful," Angelina said, concerned. "No, I'm fine," Harry mumbled, though his voice was shaky. "Wood, in the next game, don't worry about me. Just focus on scoring as many goals as you can." "No, that won't work," Wood replied, frowning. "Catching the snitch is worth 150 points. You think we can just score that many goals?" "But Snape's definitely going to target me," Harry said nervously. I'm worried." "There's no reason to worry, Harry," George chimed in, patting Harry on the shoulder with a grin. "Remember, we're playing Hufflepuff. What's there to be nervous about?" Harry blinked, a bit confused, wondering if George had hit his head when he fell and was confusing Hufflepuff with Ravenclaw. "I'm serious, Snape will target me," Harry insisted. "He hates me. I don't even have to do anything wrong in potions, and he still finds a reason to take points." "Don't sweat it, everyone's lost points to Snape," Fred laughed. "So, how many points has he taken from you at once?" 15, Harry whispered, almost feeling guilty. He worried that maybe his potions blunders were partly why Gryffindor was trailing in the house standings. But to his surprise, Fred didn't look bothered in the slightest. "Only 15. Fred said, sounding amused. "I thought it would be more." Harry stared at him, stunned. "Only 15 points. That sounded like a lot." Maybe George's fall had actually affected Fred, too. But then, that didn't make sense, he'd never heard of twins sharing concussions. Fred chuckled and went on. "Do you have any idea how many points Kyle's lost in potions?" Harry shook his head, puzzled. He'd assumed that someone as accomplished as Kyle would probably earn extra points rather than lose them. 50. George held up a hand, dead serious. Once, Snape took a full 50 points from him. And on any normal day, Kyle usually loses around 20 points for all sorts of reasons, Fred added. If it weren't for Kanna earning points back, Hufflepuff would be right down at the bottom of the house standings with us. Harry was speechless. The thought of someone like Kyle losing so many points was beyond belief. It was almost as unthinkable as Hermione forgetting to do her homework. Fred continued, "So you see, Harry, compared to Kyle, you're practically safe from Snape's wrath." With him around, George added, grinning, "We've got nothing to worry about." The twins exchanged a look and burst into a wicked laugh. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 200, Neville, you need to be more confident. Meanwhile, Kyle and the rest of the Hufflepuff team had just returned to the castle after leaving the Quidditch pitch when Harris stopped them. "Wait a moment," Harris said, patting his head. "Wood interrupted me earlier, and I almost forgot to mention something important." His tone grew serious. "We need to be on alert. The referee for our next match is going to be Professor Snape." The moment he said it, everyone's gaze landed squarely on Kyle. Thanks to Mikkel and Ryan's chatter, nearly every Hufflepuff knew about Professor Snape's tendency to single Kyle out. Hearing this news, the team's first thought was that Snape had grown tired of mere point deductions and wanted a new way to cause trouble for Kyle. And Quidditch, they figured, was the perfect opportunity. "Are you certain, Captain?" one of the players asked, frowning. "Professor Snape's never been a referee before. Are you sure this isn't some prank?" "Madam Hooch told us herself," Harris confirmed. All 4 team captains were informed. "Then why don't you just skip this game?" Cedric blurted out. Realizing what he'd said, he quickly looked at Harris, embarrassed. Urging Kyle, one of their key players, to bow out of the match right in front of their captain, such a suggestion would be enough to stir up the whole Quidditch world. Harris was easygoing, but if it had been anyone else, Cedric might have found himself in the hospital wing already. Cedric laughed awkwardly, trying to explain. "What I meant was, if Snape targets Kyle during the match, we'll effectively be down a player, which will make things even harder for us." To Cedric's surprise, Harris didn't look upset. Instead, he turned to Kyle with a serious expression. "Cedric has a point. If you don't want to play in this match, I'd support that decision." Harris had thought it over carefully. Hufflepuff was already leading in the house points, well over 100 points ahead of Slytherin in second place, so even if they lost this game, it wouldn't jeopardize their overall standing. Encouraged by Harris's words, the rest of the team chimed in. "Then we'll just need a reason for Madam Hooch to allow a substitution. How about pretending to break your leg? Or actually breaking your leg?" Everyone began offering their ideas, each more extreme than the last. Kyle felt increasingly uneasy. If they kept going, he'd probably be stuck in the hospital wing for the rest of the term. "Hold on." Kyle interrupted, exasperated. "When did I ever say I was quitting?" "But..." Someone started to protest. "There's no but," Kyle insisted, shaking his head. "If I sit out this time, what's to stop Snape from being the referee again in the next match, and the one after that? Should I just stop playing altogether?" Harris looked thoughtful, frowning slightly. "So, there's no need for all this worry," Kyle said, smiling. "Besides, Snape might not even focus on me. Don't forget, Gryffindor has Harry Potter on their team, and he's probably even less popular with Snape than I am." "Harry Potter?" Harris paused, looking surprised. He hadn't heard anything about that. "Yes," Kyle confirmed. "You can ask around, everyone in his year knows it." Harris's expression softened, clearly reassured. "All right, if you're sure it's okay, then it's settled." Back inside the castle, Kyle parted ways with his teammates and headed to the library to finish his Transfiguration homework before curfew. In the second-floor corridor, Kyle ran into Neville, who didn't appear to be in great shape. Someone had cast the leglocker curse on him, causing his legs to stick together so tightly that he could only hop along the corridor like a rabbit. "What happened?" Kyle asked, frowning as he helped Neville break the charm. "Malfoy." Neville replied in a shaky voice. "I ran into him outside the library. He said he'd always wanted to try that charm on someone." "You didn't resist?" Kyle asked, and Neville shook his head. "No, there were too many of them." "That's not good, Neville," Kyle said, "you need to try to be braver." "Yeah, you're right," Neville said, choking back tears. "Malfoy said I'm too weak to be in Gryffindor." He wiped his nose. "But I can't do it. I can't even manage the most basic charms, and they're right, I don't deserve to be learning magic." "No, Neville, you have to believe in yourself." Kyle gave his shoulder a reassuring pat. Getting an acceptance letter to Hogwarts means you have the potential to become a wizard. Thank you for saying that, Kyle, Neville replied, his voice quavering. But I'm just hopeless. I can't learn anything. Maybe you just haven't found the right direction yet. Kyle smiled, then added, could you do me a favor? Of course. Neville answered quickly. But I don't know if I'll mess it up. I mess up everything, even the simplest stuff. It's fine, I believe in you, Kyle said, handing Neville a few seeds. What are these? Neville asked, staring at the tiny seeds in his hand. Ladies' mantle seeds, Kyle explained. I've been meaning to grow a few of these, but with all the Quidditch practices, I haven't had the time to care for them. He paused. Could you help me with that? I don't know if I can. Neville said nervously, holding the seeds as though they might break. I've never grown anything before, and I even forget to feed Trevor sometimes. Just give it your best shot, Kyle replied with a shrug. Anyway, they're not very costly, just 10 galleons each. Neville's hands shook, and he almost dropped the seeds. How much, he stammered. 10 galleons, Kyle repeated. Neville's trembling intensified. He looked down at the 5 seeds in his hand, realizing he was now holding 50 galleons worth. 50 galleons, more than he could imagine repaying. Oh, and one more thing, Kyle added casually. These seeds have been with me a while, and they got a bit soaked during Quidditch practice, so they're not in the best shape. You'd better plant them quickly if they're going to have a chance. At this, Neville's eyes widened, near tears. Regret surged through him as he clutched the seeds, hoping he could just hand them back and pretend nothing had happened. But when he looked up, Kyle was already halfway down the corridor, standing on a moving staircase, being whisked to the other side. Neville hurried after him, but he was too afraid to run fast while holding the precious seeds. By the time he reached the corridor, Kyle was already gone. Just as Neville stood there, bewildered and uncertain, he heard faint voices from a nearby room. Without a second thought, he opened the door, only to find no sign of Kyle, just 2 older students huddled together, whispering. Now the fun in this clip is over. Which listeners haven't liked and commented yet? You can press like and comment to encourage the admin find the fun in the next clip. May the listeners be happy forever.